Flight 24, that Firebird's going to have to refuel, so he'll be breaking station shortly. I just want you to check with Bravo and see if he can put an adjustment on this RTR that we got programmed to go down here where we took that AK-47 fire over.
Every 80 years, nations often experience colossal events. There are different theories about the cycle, for example. The fourth turning theory focuses on the cyclical strengths of institutions versus individuals. Others surmise that 4 generations after a major crisis, there are no more older people to warn the society, and the younger people take peace and prosperity for granted. Well, exactly 80 years ago, America was mired in the Great Depression, and World War II was about to begin. Yet predictably, most Americans and Europeans now cannot even fathom such scenarios repeating in their lifetime. There are 2 major catalysts that can ignite catastrophic wars in the next decade: the debt-based economic crisis in the West and the great power rivalries. That is to say, the US and EU representing the globalists versus Russia and China. Geopolitical tensions that are simmering now will reach a crescendo very soon. Without extraordinary caution and prudence, we're destined to become another victim of history's inexorable mill. The US is poised to become the world's second economy in the next few years. China will be number 1 before 2026. So what does China's rise mean to Western corporations and the globalists who control them? Loss of power and wealth. And that's something the globalists are not going to just let happen. There's more to China's rise than just GDP, however. In late 2017, US News and World Report ranked China's Tsinghua University as number 1 for computer science and engineering, dethroning MIT. In high-tech areas such as 5G, driverless vehicles, electric vehicles, passenger drones, 3D printing, artificial intelligence, supercomputers, quantum computing, and numerous other fields, China is now number 1 or 2. Throughout history, an established power has never passively watched a rising power take its spot. As Harvard professor Graham T. Allison pointed out, 75% of the time, the established power goes to outright war with the rising one. Furthermore, after the fall of the Soviet Union, American intellectuals' favorite phrase was the end of history, and John Bolton himself famously claimed that there should only be one country in the UN's Permanent Security Council, the USA. Alas, Putin came along and resuscitated the Russian bear that was on life support. He thwarted the globalists in Ukraine and Syria, survived a Wall Street engineered drop in oil price, prevented the collapse of the Russian economy in spite of severe sanctions, shored up enormous gold and foreign exchange reserves, and even managed to develop hypersonic ICBMs that can evade America's vaunted missile defense systems. Moreover, Putin is now working with the Chinese on US independent versions of the internet, banking systems, credit card platforms. All of these have turned Putin into the globalist public enemy number 1. In the 1960s, the CIA came up with all sorts of false flag attacks to blame Russia. Now, the Russian hacking interference claim and the spy poisoning drama are just the previews. You can expect much, much more in the coming months and years. Hence the Middle East powder keg. If Western firms can construct oil-gas pipelines from the Middle East to Europe, the latter can say niet to Russian oil and gas. Without Europe as the customer, Russia will suffer immensely and perhaps have to surrender. And by surrendering, it will lose its national identity and eventually its sovereignty. Controlling the Middle East also means controlling the land and sea routes of China's Belt and Road Initiative. A few moderate rebels in strategic locations can greatly disrupt China's Europe-bound trains. This is why Syria and Iran are so important to all sides of the geopolitical struggle. With neocons and pro-Israel warmongers filling up Trump's cabinet, a war in Iran is more likely than ever before, which will most definitely draw Russia and possibly China into the conflict. From China's point of view, its Achilles heel is that it is surrounded by America's vassal states, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea for now. The Philippines used to be America's puppet, but it's now leaning towards China and Russia thanks to Duterte. How North Korea will turn out is yet to be seen. India, which was colonized by the British for 200 years, is experiencing amnesia and is quickly ceding its sovereignty to the US now. Japanese elites, under pressure from globalists, are trying to change their own constitution so that Japan can build up its military again. This is obviously an ominous sign. Thus globalists, and their liberal proxy states in the West, have a lot of alternative options to wage war against China. Asia has been growing rapidly and enjoying unprecedented prosperity, but there's a good chance they will screw it up by becoming sacrificial pawns in the geopolitical chessboard. But even if the globalists have mighty military and vassal states to impose their hegemony, they have one tremendous weakness: a fake economy based on debt and money printing. America's enormous strength is based on the petrodollar, an unfair system that forces other countries to buy oil and other commodities in US dollars. Take that away, and the American empire starts to wobble. Without enormous demand for the US dollar and treasuries, interest rates will go up, debt will become expensive, and interest payments on existing debt will skyrocket. This is why China, the largest importer of oil, just started oil futures that trade in yuan. Before the end of the year, China plans to announce systems where one can directly buy and sell oil in yuan. If China were to get out of the globalist hegemony, there's no better way than to establish petro-yuan, especially if it's backed by gold, which they have a lot of. Thanks to the deep state, liberals, and the Democratic Party, US-Russia relations will continue to deteriorate as sanctions pile on. Globalists will also use the anti-Russia hysteria to create an EU army, bolster NATO, and provoke Russia with missile defense systems and military buildup along its borders. The US will continue to build its troops to encircle China, saber-rattle in the South China Sea, incite Muslim separatists in Western China, and try to turn Asian countries against it. There will be an endless economic, propaganda, and hybrid war both against Russia and China in the coming years. Americans, and sadly most Europeans now as well, are ignorant about geopolitics and are easily swayed by propaganda and programmed to accept wild stories without demanding proof or evidence. And this combination of ruthless elites and gullible masses is extremely dangerous. Without great restraint, diplomacy, a bit of wisdom and compromise, the Western world will simply be sleepwalking into a nuclear disaster in the coming decade.
I will gather stars out of the blue for you, for you.